So yeah, we're past 8 o'clock now. It's just a good time to introduce our guest today. We've got someone here today who is very familiar with research, an expert in research to do with MBTI. That's his daily job and his passion in life. He writes an article for the Typeface magazine every month about the latest in research and MBTI. And he's somewhere near Oxford in a place called Whitney. Hello, John Hackston.
Hello there, Richard, and hello everybody. Whitney apparently is famous for his blankets. Used to be famous for having David Cameron as an MP, but we'll move swiftly on from that one. But yeah, that's why I am this evening.
Great. And,
sitting in my kitchen behind the fireplace there.
Yes, you've got wonderful period features back there, John.
We should have done this a few months ago. There'd be a load of garlic hanging up there, but it's all eaten now.
Oh, lovely. Yeah, we can see like sprigs of lavender or something.
I think it's lavender. I was about to turn around, be very rude and turn around and look at it, but I'll stay staring straight ahead for now.
Yeah, it's very, very homely. I like it. It's a lovely place you got. So let's talk a little bit about how you've come to be here. I know you've studied psychology. Are you a chartered occupational psychologist?
Yes, I'm a chartered psychologist. I studied psychology at Goldsmiths College in South East London. And from there, I essentially, as one was able to do in the 1980s, sadly not so much now, was able to sort of bum around for a little while. And then I saw an advertisement for a research assistant for a test publisher, which was at that point in time called Savile and Hoselove Limited. Since became SHL, then became CEB, is now Gartner. These things all move around. As a research assistant, and I stayed there for quite a few years, involved with mainly research in looking at personality questionnaires, research around personality questionnaires, trait-based personality questionnaires at that point in time, and then moved on to OPP in October 1997. So I've been around OPP, Oxford Psychologist Press, as it was at the time and is no more, for just over 20 years. Before I joined OPP, I was sort of aware of the MBTI and type a little bit, and it had made a little bit of a noise. But I didn't really know about it properly until I joined OPP, and of course, I started to know all about it quite quickly. Initially, again, I was involved in research in things like constructing U-tests and personality questionnaires, initially for clerical staff, things like that. But for most of my time at OPP, I've been involved with the MBTI and type generally in all sorts of ways. Yes, very much in research, and we might talk a little bit about more about that later, but also in training, and I don't know how many people I've trained vis-a-vis MBTI over the years. Over those 20 years, I wouldn't like to think, and also to some extent in consultancy with the MBTI. But yeah, you're probably right. Members of BAPT and people who read Typeface probably more familiar with me as a face of research. In that little picture, you can slightly younger, with longer hair, and without the glasses.
Yeah, I'm sure people love the article because it does give us a sense of how it ties into the wider world of psychology, yeah, and published papers and so on. So we're really grateful for that. So thanks for writing that. So I think it's really important, that we do keep that connection to the academic world as well.
And one of the things that we do as far as we can is to make that connection. So I'm very happy to be at the BAPT conference in April in lovely Milton Keynes. But we also managed to get type-based research and other things around type to other events and other conferences as well. So just a month ago, almost exactly a month ago, I was at the British Psychology Society Division of Occupational Psychology Conference, which was just up the road in Stratford-on-Avon this year. And it's really good to get, I think, MBTI and type-based things in front of occupational psychologists who will generally use trait questionnaires or generally admit to using trait questionnaires, perhaps. Also things like last year, the European Association of Work and Organisation Psychology Conference. This year, hopefully, the International Test Commission Conference. So yeah, making people aware in academic psychology and also practitioners outside of a type field that there is this thing called type, and it is really useful, and it does have some oomph and some rigor behind it.
And yeah, great. And what is the sort of reaction at that conference to you presenting psychological type to your peers who, as you said, often are more commonly using trait questionnaires?
Well, mostly pretty good. There have been over the years the occasional snide comment by people who are big type aficionados, and one of the things we've been trying to do is to actually show how type links into what people will call evidence-based practice. So that psychologists and others who say we should do things according to the evidence, which I think is absolutely true, we can say, actually, here is some evidence. Here is some evidence of how you can actually use type in those contexts. And one of the sort of pieces of research we've been doing over the last few years is look at how you might use type in different contexts. So we did some research on how type might relate to the sort of office environment that make you prosper otherwise, how you might use email and what might be the stresses that come to you from email, how you might prosper or otherwise as an entrepreneur, and what things would help and what wouldn't help. And all the time we're trying to build out, not just by saying, well, you think it works like this, but actually here's a chunk of research evidence that says type is useful, and it's, in this particular instance, useful in these sorts of ways. And those have been quite successful in getting those sort of words out at those academic conferences, but also hopefully actually useful for type practitioners as well. And also for people who may not be type practitioners, but just want to use some of these ideas and concepts in their everyday life as well, I think.
I mean, obviously, I've answered some of your research questionnaires before, and
they're getting steadily longer, so we're going to try and shorten them in the future.
And it's obviously, that's the important thing, is to get the people to answer these things and to get the data in, right? And
yeah.
I mean, have you got any new ones coming up? Have you got any things for people to answer?
So the most recent one we completed and analysed was actually about type and self-awareness. And because I knew I was having this conversation tonight, there will be one of those quick guides. This is, as you can see, printed on A4 paper, so it'll be a little while since it's out there for people to use, but about how type relates to self-awareness, how it raises self-awareness, how type's useful in that aspect, and so on. The one we've just closed down in terms of the data collection was about type and what's been called the gig economy. So the idea that increasingly people are not working for organizations, they are at least ostensibly working for themselves, or are they? One might think of people like Uber drivers, for example. And how does a knowledge of personality, where might that be useful in perhaps coping with the stresses and strains of that sort of work? How do people with regular jobs see gig workers and vice versa? And does personality feed into that? And are there, one of the things we want to do, we're just starting to crunch the numbers, so and it's sort of working out quite like this, is are there in effect sort of almost scales, traits of being in the gig economy and working in the economy that we can look at and how they might relate to type as well, to help people to say, given that this seems to be my type, this is who I think I am, what strengths might I have, what development needs might I have if I'm working in the gig economy. So again, all these ones, not using type erroneously in some sort of selection way, but saying, given who you are, if this is where you want to go, these may be some of the things you want to think about. Or if you are a type practitioner working with those people, these are some of the things that they might want to think about.
Mm-hmm. Now, my preference is INTJ, and
yeah.
I was literally in the gig economy for a lot of years as a musician.
Okay.
What sort of nuggets could you share with me about that. My
You see, we
typing.
should have done this session in about 3 weeks' time, and then I would have had some nice chunky stuff to say to you, because we've literally only just started crunching the data. We closed the thing down in Wikio. We spent the last week sort of cleaning and defining the data. So watch this space, but we will be putting stuff out there. We may not have actually published anything by the time of a BAPT conference, but if any of you see me at the BAPT conference, grab hold of me, tell me what you believe your best fit type to be, including yourself, Richard, and I'll give you some preview of the findings as they relate to your type.
Fantastic. I look forward to those.
Well, let me ask you a question, actually. How did you find, and I can quickly write these down and put them in the findings, how did you find working in gig economy? What did you like about it, and what do you not like about it?
Well, it was interesting, actually. My brother was sharing some old school reports of mine that he found the other day, and one of the teacher's comments was about me being really wanting to seek independence.
Oh, okay.
And I think, you know, that I could see that how that ties into my type preferences as an INTJ, and that certainly was a driver as me being a self-employed musician as well within in the gig economy. It was independence that was driving it, I think.
Yeah. And I think in most of these series that we've done, in a way, to someone who knows about type, the findings aren't necessarily surprising, but it's good to have them based on data so that they are more difficult, if you will, to contradict and say, oh no, it's just this type of issue. It doesn't mean anything. Why don't you look at this other thing instead?
Yeah. So now you're doing this work in OPP. You're saying you've been there for 20 years, and only recently it's been taken over or merged with CPP,
yeah,
the big daddy in the United States, and now to one big sort of almost global company, right? Which is licensing the MBTI and owning the MBTI.
Yeah. And it is a global company because also CPP has offices in Singapore and in Australia, and obviously distributors around the world. Yeah.
Yeah, and your title now is Head of Thought Leadership. Is that
it is.
Okay, so tell me, like, how does that work? In what way are you leading thought? How is this job working for you?
Well, as an introvert, I tend to lead by thought rather than speech, of course. However, in terms of what my job title actually means, I think what really it means a number of things. First of all, it means that one of the things I do is to, amongst others, is to try and look at what stuff is happening out there. What stuff is happening in the world of type, but more especially what stuff is happening in other areas of psychology and occupational psychology and organization psychology. What is preoccupying organizations, and it's not just HR and their development, but other parts of organizations as well. What are the sort of more general trends in terms of where we're going, not exactly as a civilization, but certainly in terms of organizations, and bringing that information back into OPP and CPP, and stacking that up, if you will, against the things that we do know about human personality, about type, and so on. And then disseminating that information, or our use of that information, back out there into the world. And that's partly what a lot of these things like conferences and so on are all about, and the typeface article, but other articles and other papers and things that we try to put out there as well. So I guess that's what we mean, or what I mean by the thought leadership side of things. It's a bit of research, it's a bit of information dissemination, it's a bit of information collecting, trying to put all that stuff together in a useful way. And I work very closely with my colleagues in the United Kingdom and elsewhere in Europe, but also with my colleagues in the States who have the sort of more traditional research team who do all the really hard stats and things that I'm a little bit more of a dilettante about.
Great. And so a lot of this is obviously going to lead into the future and where type goes in terms of theory and products and how it's implemented. And I mean, tell us a little bit about what's going to expect in the future.
So I think one of the interesting things that we're going to pick up on, in fact, myself and my colleague David Hunt, in our conversation, in our keynote speech at BAPT, is a little bit about, are we actually changing in some ways as people? And if we are, how does type feed into that? And we've got some suggestions from data we have over the last 10 years in Europe and data over the last more like 13 years in the States, that behaviorally, at least, if we think of reported type rather than best fit type as a proxy for behavior, we're becoming a little bit more, not as individuals, but as a group, as a population, ISTJ. And that effect is much more noticeable on younger people than it is on people of my generation. Exactly why that is an interesting question that we're trying to work out what's going on. But it seems to us that it is connected with the advent of digital technology as something which is part of people's everyday lives. So one of the things we'll be exploring at BAPT is what has happened in the digital world and how this may be affecting people and how this may relate to where things are going to in the future. Because if we look at how people are not just using type, but how people are working generally, increasingly people are if you like, augmenting what they do with IT, with things on their phones, with Fitbits, etc. And because people are increasingly used to using that sort of information, that digital information, I don't know what percentage of people have a Fitbit or look at their how many steps they've done on their phone or whatever. This is increasingly becoming part of people's daily lives. So because people are used to using that sort of information, using that sort of sources as information, one of the things I think we as type practitioners and people who use type need to be is actually making use of that. Because the paradigm on which you go to see a type expert, you have a nice conversation, you work out what your best fit type is, perhaps you get a takeaway introduction for type or something, and you use it for a while, but then because it's not reinforced and because people are used to things being reinforced, now it slowly trickles away, is probably not a paradigm for the future. So should we be talking about things like apps on your phone, which will act as a type companion, perhaps, which would allow you to make use of your type in different ways? Should we be talking about effectively things like Fitbits? And we know already there are organizations which will produce Fitbit style things that go around your waist, which look at your heartbeat and also look at things like your galvanic spin response, in effect work out when you're stressed. So if you had a tool like that in combination with knowledge of your type and an app which said, we think it looks like you're getting stressed, have you tried these techniques? It may seem or feel a bit big brotherish at times, but actually perhaps that's a useful thing for people to help them manage who they are. So I think there's a wealth of possibilities out there. I think one of the interesting questions is that going to make things better? Or are we going to go down into some sort of dystopia? And that's one of the things we'll be talking about when we're at the BAPT conference in April.
So yeah, the future sounds like, we might have little digital type companions that help us to bring the theory into our daily lives and actually implement it, rather than it, as you say, trickling away as it can.
Yeah.
We're talking about, quite complex ideas about the world that, if you don't use them regularly, as we do usually, then they go.
Exactly. And I think as people use type all the time, it's easy to forget that a lot of people will, and I apologize for using this phrase, have the MBTI done to them. And those letters sort of vaguely stay in their head for a couple of weeks and then they slowly trickle away. And then you have a conversation with them a year later. So, yeah, I had that MBTI thing. I think it was an I. Yeah, definitely an I. SP. It was a red. That's right. It wasn't. I was a red. So, these things need to be reinforced. People need to use it all the time in order to really make use of all the good stuff that type can bring us.
Yeah. And what do you think, from a practitioner's point of view, is the real key to getting that persistence of use and understanding and integrating the theory into daily life?
I think the key is to make that information available at the right time, effectively. So that you, to do that example, if you are stressed, the app says, oh, perhaps you're stressed. So that if you're going into a meeting with Joe down the corridor, and you've both logged into this app or this companion, you think, okay, how can I best have a productive conversation with Joe? Oh yeah, these things might work. That would almost be a digital version of the existing Flipper type tip. Yeah. So you can see lots of things that are both individual, that are also what we could use with two people or even with teams. I think there's a really intriguing role for type in the idea of well-being. And well-being is something that people are, or the need for well-being is something that people are increasingly conscious of. And my colleagues in the States and in Australia have done quite a bit of research into type and well-being. We're doing some more this year. And we're hoping to get some really chunky stuff out of that that will be really useful to help people know their type, increase their well-being, think about what strategy might work both at home and also if they work in organizations. And again, this is all the sort of information that could be in websites, could be in an app. And it's, I think, having that information on that, because actually that's what people are used to. Yeah. I don't know when you, Richard, last thought, I want to find out about something. I'll go to the library and read an encyclopedia.
Yeah, sure.
You know, and that's just a huge change. When you're watching a film and think, what was that actress in? Oh yeah, let me just check that. Oh yeah, that's okay. So having that information at your fingertips is something that just people are, everybody, I think, almost is used to. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the well-being piece is interesting because I think thinking around this, a lot of the things that we've done, a lot of research that I've done with type over the last few years has ultimately been around well-being. It's been around things like stress. It's about things like avoiding email stress, things like what sort of office environment might give you the best well-being. So a lot of these things ultimately about well-being. And one of the next pieces of research we're probably going to do is probably going to be about the idea of the always-on culture, the fact that increasingly people can't switch off and don't switch off, and what the implications of that are for our well-being, and how perhaps we can use our knowledge of type to manage that minefield as best we can.
Yeah, it's very exciting stuff, and I think the future, it's going to have all this technology. We're going to have different ways to integrate type into daily life. Really bring the theory into daily use. And not as future is, where does what's type's future in terms of getting over the misconceptions that some people have, or the arguments people make against type, the sort of some of the negativity, like how do you think that might work going forward?
Well, I think we've actually over the years produced a huge amount of content to try and contradict the criticisms of type. And unfortunately, some of your criticisms are a little bit like zombies. You sort of kill them, you think you shot it in the head with all facts and information, and then you turn around and then suddenly it's reared itself out of its grave again and is sort of lumbering towards you with the same criticisms. There's a particular article by a guy called Pittenger dating back to 1993, actually based on a version of the MBTI which went obsolete in 1976, which continually comes round and round again. So we're going to really try and have a push on that between OPP and CPP this year. We're going to collect together and collate all the content we've done over the years, and we're going to see how we can best present that. And one of the things we want to do is to present it positively, because one of the mistakes perhaps we've made in the past is saying, here's some stuff to refute MBTI criticisms. Let's present the information positively so that the information is there, so people can use it. If people want to user information, refuted criticisms is there, but we're not presenting it initially in that sort of negative way. We're going to look to see how we can best make our information available. So it may be that there may be infographics, it may be that there's some sort of web landing page, it may be something which has a number of different levels in it. So there will be some people, not many of them, fortunately, who start to ask really complicated questions about the factor structure of the MBTI and how is it to stack up under confirmatory factor analysis and so on. And we need to answer those questions, but probably not in the same place as the people who say, will it sort of give the same results if I do it again? And is that important anyway? So we need to have that sort of levels in there as well. Exactly how we do this, we don't quite know yet. But that's one of our big tasks between my team and research team in the States, and also the marketing teams and others over the course of this year, to try and really put something together that will be a resource for ourselves, for type practitioners, for people who are just interested in the idea of type, to actually slay some of those dragons and make that information available.
Great. So we're slaying dragons and zombies.
Slaying dragons and zombies, and mixing metaphors as we go.
Fantastic. Yeah. So there's a lot. There's a lot of work to be done. I think you said it, positively educating people about the difference between trait and type, and ultimately, they as mindset, as ways of looking at personality, they come from different assumptions, different mindsets.
Yes.
And it's really getting a handle on what those are. That there's a lot of basic knowledge that could be shared, right?
Absolutely. One of the things we are hoping to be able to do is to have an academic article published later this year. And if that all comes off, that will be a really good resource to actually drill down into some of those aspects. I can't really say a lot more about it because it hasn't been accepted and so on. But it'll be good to have an academic reference for some of these things in a well-known journal. I do wonder if the tide is turning a little bit. I hear at things like conferences less snide comments about the MBTI than I did. It may be that people just know who I am a bit more, so they don't make it to my face. But I do hope that we are trying to turn that tide a little bit. There will be people who will criticise the MBTI. Quite often when you look at it, there are people who are surprising enough just publish their own questionnaire and are looking for an easy hit in terms of getting publicity. So that's never going to stop. But we can do as much as we can to make it easy for people to say, no, hang on a second, this is the real information here.
Yeah, I mean, you know a bit about my work as well. I know I'm really keen on reconceptualizing some of the basic stuff. Asking, what is a preference really, and how can we explain that in terms of other ideas and from a wider range of psychological theories? And they're really trying to integrate rather than
absolutely. And I think that works. I think that works important. I think there's room for both type and trait in the way we conceptualize people's behavior. Certainly in terms of people's behavior. I think it's important that we have all of those tools. We have the immediate answers to questions that people have. We have the different ways of looking at things. We have the answers to the statistical questions. We have all of those things to hand, because people will be coming at this from very different points of view. So yeah, I absolutely accept what you're saying about those bases of how we see personality, how we see preferences, and I think that's a useful avenue. But I think we need to have all of those different tools ready for different questions. So because those questions have come from very different places and from different people.
Yeah, it's good, to address this, and I'm glad, to hear that CPP are really pushing to do this. So you'll have to watch this space.
Watch this space, and hopefully, I mean, what I would say is that there have been a lot of work and a lot of content already, and some of that's just sort of been difficult to find, or it hasn't been made easy to understand. And I think one of our jobs is to just make all that stuff more accessible.
That's great. Now I'm aware we've got to about 8:30 now, and we've got a 30 to 40-minute window.
Okay.
Got a question here from Jonathan Perra. He's saying, is there a danger of constantly seeking type insights rather than enjoying who we are and where we're at? I think maybe he's getting at, like, are we overanalyzing things?
Well, addressed to someone with very definite preferences for INTP, that's an interesting question. Are we overanalyzing things? I don't think so. I prefer to say that analysis is there should we wish to consult it. But I absolutely applaud I was going to say luxuriates, that the ability to luxuriate in who you are as well. Don't know if that quite answers Jonathan's question. But yeah, I think both have their place.
Yeah, and I think for me now, I mean, perhaps certain types are more driven to understand things for the sake of understanding them, and they can't let it lie. And perhaps some people will be better off just being in their life rather than analysing it.
And that's why I think, in all the things that we're doing, a range of, not levels, different ways of putting information over is important. And I absolutely accept that my tendency to pull things apart and work out exactly how the cogs work is not necessarily what's going to float everybody's boat. And that's perhaps one of the lessons that type has taught me, that weirdly enough, there are people who are very different to who I am, and they're not strange or mad, they're just coming from a different place, and type hopefully helps us to understand that.
Yeah, and on that note, this is, once a question I always ask people in these chats is, what is one of the biggest aha moments you've had yourself? You being an INTP, for instance, as preference-wise, what from when you first learned about type, what really sort of blew you away?
I think, and this may be a not uncommon point that people will say, and it was in my first MBTI feedback, and it was talking about stress, actually. That whole stress reaction, both the initial exaggeration of a dominant function and why I would go away to my cave and go really quiet, and also the grip reaction as well. So that thing resonated a lot for me because that had always seemed rather, I knew I did that, but I thought, why do I do that? That's really strange. And actually having a theory that talked about that, I think was actually really useful to me. So that was a big aha moment. I think other big aha moments were just starting to appreciate how other people are different to me, appreciating that I didn't have to be an organized person as long as I was organized enough for other people around me. And also actually understanding that type isn't the be-all and end-all of our behavior. So as someone with perceiving preference, you may expect me to have perhaps a more laissez-faire attitude to timings than people with judging preference, but I really hate being late. I really hate being late. And that is probably partly to do with the fact that my parents, and my mother in particular, were always late for stuff. And I think I've reacted against that, and I really hate being late for anything, for any reason. I don't like being too early either, so I'll sit in the car outside and make sure I'm not too early, but I really don't want to be late.
Mm-hmm. It's fascinating. Yeah, it's great. The stress stuff is, as you say, really powerful.
Yeah.
Great. I can really relate to that. Learning about my extroverted sensing inferior function was a huge thing. Yeah. And, I'm constantly battling the physical world every day, as no doubt you are with the social etiquette of life. So in some ways as an INTP. So we're coming up close to the end. I just want to quickly go back to via a question from Kieran. He's talking about asking about what kind of tips might be involved in this app. But rather than getting you to answer that, I'll just mention the conference because I think we're going to hear a little bit about that in your talk with David Hunt.
Yeah.
BAPT conference, the 12th to the 14th of April this year in Milton Keynes. People can see the amazing conference brochure that we've put together now on the lineup on the website on bapt.org.uk, and that's where you can also book the conference. We're very lucky to have some really amazing speakers, guests from the United States. See John here from OPP in the UK, a whole host of experts in the area of type and its application in so many different fields. So it's really exciting. A great new venue for the conference as well. So yeah, I'll just point people towards that. So the website, and they can find out a little bit more. John, we're really looking forward to hearing your talk about the digital age and what the future holds for us.
Great, thank you. And hopefully by the time of the conference, we'll have some more information on what the future will hold for us. And we'll actually, from now, be in the future. So there we go.
Exactly, yeah, we've got real evidence of the future. And I mean, it keeps actually, on that note, you know, really, I keep seeing things that I would have thought 20 years ago were the future. And that constantly reminds me that we are actually in the future.
Yeah. And even what we're doing now, you know.
Yeah, amazing. So yeah, the Zoom tool that, you know, would not have been possible a few years ago. So yeah. On that note, yes, the next webinar, we've still got Dario Nardi coming up as well. Got another extra webinar from Sandra Strope as well from the US as a bonus before the conference. So I encourage people to go and sign up for the next of these free webinars coming up every month on a Tuesday evening. So there's lots more exciting stuff to come. Thank you again, John Hackston.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. It's great to have you here.
See you and others hopefully at the conference.
Yeah, fantastic. And thanks to everyone for joining. We're signing off now, and hopefully we'll post this so you can also watch it again later and go over it again. So good night, everyone.
Thank you. Good night.
Bye.